It gives me rise in my conclusions for three comments. The first, I think, are the observations which we had, which were superb from Dominic, from Paul, and from Richard, about what the current situation is. And it leaves one, I think, a little bit uneasy of whether they're actually using the telephone to talk to each other. Because on the European side, where I was for the past 10 days or so, seeing people who are running the institutions and whatever else, because they're still involved in a number of networks, they say, look, all you have to do is to read the Council decisions of the 15th of December or those in April time, and you know clearly what the EU's attitude is. We're going to be very flexible, but when it comes to the single market, there's no possibility of negotiation. However, as we heard this morning, there are a lot of people who still think in our political views we'll set the scene and then people will come to our views because this is the way we would like it to be. But from history of the whole process since Article 50, unfortunately it seems as if on most occasions it's the EU which has prevailed and ours basically coming, we don't want a divorce bill, okay, we'll pay it. We don't want to give you EU citizens' rights, but we'll do it. And yes, we have some kinds of problems and others. So when you then come to this particular situation on the transition period, which you mentioned, Richard, which is not something which is a given by any means, because to have taxation without representation has never been popular. That wasn't popular in the US, and we know what happened there. But I don't see how it's going to be popular in this country that from April 1st, 2019, we will be living at least a period of 2 years or perhaps longer where we will have to adopt laws which we haven't had any feed into. I don't see how that is going to work. And also picking up on your point, Richard, that where you have Michel Barnier, who is not of the Commission, but he's actually the representative of the member states, then don't read those people too literally who said, oh, there's an Italian minister, or there's a Belgian minister, or there's a Luxembourg minister who thinks differently. Well, the message I had this week is you'll have the French and the Germans who'll be toughening the position of Barnier, not weakening it. And that's what we will have to see, I think, in the months ahead. But it is actually true. We had an article out on our website in SECEN in the last few months, entitled, I wrote it, on Cameron's folly. We are faced with a situation which is an impossible one for a developed country for all the reasons that we would like, having so little to steer us into how we're actually going to arrive at the destination, which is going to satisfy everybody. And I think this conversation this morning has shown just how different some of the views still are. Of course, the thing will be once we get to this time next year, we will then know exactly what kind of deal has been struck. And let's hope the optimism which was shown down here, we'll get to some kind of thing, but I think it will be difficult to get there. So there's growing anxiety, and that brings me to my second point. From the business community, said very clearly by you, Mark, I think it's said exactly what the views are, that if you have big investment, it doesn't happen overnight, it's a change which happens over a period of time, but there are things beginning to happen there where there's less investment occurring, and so in time, if they can't get this kind of fluid, frictionless environment to be able to operate, they're in a global economy. They can go where they like. And that's the problem about being optimistic. Yes, you can be optimistic because we have a great country and a whole lot of things which go our way. But at the moment, we don't have the pathway to know how we're going to be able to get that done. I think that if you're looking into 2020, the summation of what Dominic had said is probably as accurate as you'll get it, saying we're headed for a Canada-type agreement because that's what we have imposed. We don't want to be in the single market, we don't want to be in the customs union. In the European Parliament resolutions, they talk of an association agreement. Maybe we can get something like that to respond to the Prime Minister's desire for a broader partnership. Because nobody was on the continent, in my view, to punish us. They just want to resolve what we actually want, how we're going to get there, and that's the process which is underway over the next 3-4 years as we tie up all the details of our departure. It does look, I think, and I think even if one would think a referendum, a second referendum might be a desirable one, which I probably know most of you do not, I think that it's unlikely to happen if people feel that there's no change. And that's where we are, as you, Mark, you said rightly, we haven't left yet. And so it's not surprising that as we haven't left yet, nobody's seen any difference for whether we're going to be in or out. It's only when we've gone that we begin to see maybe these economic adjustments, whether done by the private community or by the public sector, have actually a semblance of reality. And then we might begin to say, well, that wasn't perhaps such a good suggestion. So, my last comment comes to the project of looking towards 2030, Alex, and thank you very much for raising the level of our looks, not just the problems of Brexit and whatever else, but we have major problems on the technological side, or on the demographic side, or on productivity. These are things which are really major issues, and my reflection, having been a parliamentarian for a long time, is that these are problems we're going to have whether we're inside the European Union or outside. Do we have the galvanization? Do we have the focus? Do we have the courage to invest in what is staggering infrastructure in broadband and other areas where lots of people would love to get a mobile signal wherever you are, but because of lack of infrastructural development, you're not getting there. And so what we are thinking of, and this is what I announced this morning for those who were at the meeting earlier today of our annual meeting, is that as this process of Britain leaving the European Union is happening, what we would like to do is to foster a change for a young leadership to be able to have a look at ideas in 2030. So this is why, under this leadership, this is why I wanted them to stay under Mark and under Alex. We're going to be putting an event together supported by the Southeast Conservative European Network to look at the future, to allow, to take a phrase, the youth to take control of our country, and to encourage that we're going to get more Conservative members who are of a younger generation. I mean, it's wonderful to see a lot of old friends, but it would be actually marvellous to make sure that we had a future. I don't know, John, are you still here, John Strafford? There you are at the back. Well, no, what a wonderful character, fighting for democracy wherever he is. But he tells us, you know, we're down to 70,000 members in our party, of which only 10,000 are under 30. We know perfectly well at the last election, we don't want to be negative because we need to know what the facts are so as to know what we're going to do to improve it, but maybe up to, 70-80% of those under 40 are not voting Conservative. Doesn't this send a signal that we have to galvanise ourselves to actually think about the future and to bring the young generation to actually have power to be able to decide for themselves? So that's why we've taken this decision. I'm very much looking forward to working with them, and also, of course, to keeping in contact with you as long as the network exists so that we can have this ability to communicate and discuss, which, as Paul Goodman said this morning, this doesn't exist anywhere else in the party, so we should really be proud of ourselves. Thank you.